we're at a crucial point in time where we can redirect the resources if we have the political will to essentially end the architecture of failure in juvenile justice, and that is by closing youth prisons.
So on any given night, there's over 60,000 young people who are locked up in juvenile jails and prisons. And the reality is that they're not there for committing serious violent offenses. Most of the young people are there because they have social service needs. They have often come from struggling families, and sometimes they were in the child welfare system. Often now we see more and more young people arrested in schools, and things that used to be handled through the school discipline process is now resulting in arrest and young people ending up in the juvenile justice system. A lot of the young people who are incarcerated are there because they have mental health needs. And so what we see is that young people are locked up because they've been failed by other public systems. They've been failed by the mental health system, they've been failed by the education system, and they've been failed by the child welfare system.
There are huge disparities in the juvenile justice system. Young people of color are treated much more harshly and much more punitively than white youth in the system. Part of the disparity is because of bias, that there is not objective decision making in terms of how young people are treated at every point in the system. And there's, I think, unintentional racism that's happening, and I think that there's also very blatant racism that's happening in our system. So we see these efforts combined together result in a system that is very harsh and very punitive and very unfair in terms of how young people of color are treated. Whether a policymaker or decision maker intends for the outcome to have a racially disparate outcome is not the point. It's what the outcome is. So through this effort, we hope to work with states and localities to redouble their efforts to reduce disparity and to ensure that in efforts to close youth prisons, reduce youth incarceration and out-of-home placement, and reallocate resources to community-based alternatives, that disparities actually go down. There has to be an intentional focus on this, and we believe that through efforts to engage and involve communities that are directly affected by this issue, with young people and their families who've been incarcerated or at risk of incarceration, that we will see a much more fair and humane system. Some people say we don't have enough money to fix this problem, and I believe we have enough money. We're just spending it the wrong way. And if we completely change where we're making the investment and we divest from incarceration and invest in community and young people, we will see a much different outcome.
And so there's a question, why do we continue to support youth prisons, to pour millions and millions of dollars? In most states, youth incarceration costs over $100,000 per child, and we're getting such poor returns on that spending. The question is, why do we continue to throw money into such a failed system, a system that fails young people, it fails their families, and it's a system that fails us all as a society?
Families are the biggest part of the solution to this. Kids are going to always gravitate back to their families no matter what. So it really behooves us to engage families as equal partners in whatever we're doing with kids. So in an effective community-based program, families and the youth should have equal voice and choice in what happens to them. So rather than coming in and being prescriptive and saying, this is what you need, this is what we're going to do with you, this is what we're going to do to you, we say, ask questions like, what do you need and how can we help you? And then how can you and I partner together to improve the outcomes for your kids, to help your kids stay safe, to help your kid be in the community? And I think often we hear about families being non-compliant or the biggest part of the problem, and I think it really is on us to think about families as surviving and to approach them with empathy, the way that we would our own families, and think about, what is really going on in their lives. Very few families I've ever met really don't care about their kids. Almost every family wants what's best for their kid. They may not have the resources they need to support them. They may not have access to the opportunities that they want to capitalize on for their kids. They may just need a little bit of help. What they don't need is for us to come in and remove their kid from them and from their homes and from their families. That doesn't help anybody get any further, and we know it's not what's good for the kid.
The deficit-based model doesn't work. And we've seen that in the juvenile justice system because the signature feature of the juvenile justice system is a youth prison, a place where we place a young person far from their family, far from their community. The programming is very limited. Young people are often placed in solitary confinement. Young people are not accessing the kind of educational and workforce kind of training that's necessary for their success. And then when young people leave, they're not connected to community, family, or educational supports. So we know that the deficit-based model absolutely doesn't work, but unfortunately it's the signature feature of many juvenile justice systems. That's where the money is, that's where the focus is. With Youth First, we want to dismantle that. We want an asset-based approach, we want a strength-based approach, something that helps young people to become successful adults.
What's really important about the Youth First initiative is recognizing that changes have to happen from the ground up, and that what we've seen so far in juvenile justice reform is that communities and people working in the states are what's driving the change. And so the Youth First initiative is really about building that capacity in those communities, in the states, for people to be effective in working for change.
Right now, we're at a tipping point. We're on a precipice of changing the way that we work with youth in this country, who are the most marginalized and the most vulnerable, who need us. And instead of us saying the best we can do for you is to put you in a cell someplace, we're out there saying the best we can do for you is everything we haven't tried yet, and now we're going to try it. And so I think the Youth First initiative is really a good opportunity to really have all that energy, to coalesce around the energy that's been building for a number of years by the work of a lot of smart people and families, and really bring it to fruition. And I think we can achieve the goals that the initiative has set of reducing youth incarceration by 50%.